Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Channel Inside podcast. I'm your host, Dinara, and today we're going to talk about how to better your sales in the second half of 2026. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined today by Ian Moyse. I've known Ian for quite some time now. Welcome to the show, Ian.
Hi, and good to be here. Thank you.
Ian, it's an absolute pleasure to speak to you today. Give us a little bit of a background of what you are, what you do, and where do you come from?
Sure. So in simple summary, rather than take a long time on this, I've been in sales many years. I spent a lot of time running and building channels to market. And I've also spent a lot of time running direct sales teams. So I've got a good reflection, I guess, from the differences and the similarities. I also have the pleasure to judge quite a few sales awards. So I meet a lot of salespeople from diverse industries and backgrounds. So I've got a good context, I think, of what the challenges are and the skill sets and what we face in the sales industry today.
Fantastic. Ian, today we're going to talk about how to improve sales, how to better sales in the second half. We live in a very challenging environment at the moment, economical, geopolitical, and the rise of AI. So this is a very hot topic. So I know you've led revenue for many startups and scale-up organizations and they had a great impact. So what is your secret?
So when I join organizations or I interview with them, I've always said that there's no great secret and I don't have the golden key that you just do this wondrous thing and everything's magical and it's easy. So some of it is grunt work and hard work and being committed, right? But I think it's focusing on the right things. Not an old boss of mine said to me, "Don't boil the ocean. Focus on what matters and do them really well. And other things, you can't do everything." So for driving sales, and particularly now, but I think this applies anytime. For me, it's about focusing on what are the key dials that will make a difference. What are those marginal gains? And I'll talk about that in a second, I'm sure. If you move those small dials, what things can I affect? And how much can I affect them by? If I move those key dials in small percentages, those small percentages compound together to give you a greater impact and a greater outcome. Because I think you can't come in and suddenly say, right, we're going to increase the average deal value by 5 times. The world doesn't change like that, right? But you can do slightly better. Marginal gains, the real story around that is the British cycling team. And I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know it was called marginal gains. And they focused, how did they become so successful? Because they focused on how do we get a little bit better at this, the start? How do we get slightly better at this, slightly better? How do we improve all these things in a small piece? Because they all add together to mean we can outperform. And so in sales, for me, it's about when I join an organization, and I've worked in many startups, scale-ups, and in fractional roles where they're looking for how do we get this thing, the upturn in growth? And that applies to any established business as well. If you're either flatlining or the growth isn't where you need it to be, the first thing I always do is assimilate, is understand, and often this is easier coming in new because you're not entrenched in the history and all the can-dos, the can'ts, etc. Is I look at what is the baseline of where we are today and why do we get there? What are the challenges today? Understanding the business, the product, the market, the dynamics, and then looking at, okay, the key metrics. How could I adjust those? What can I focus on that will help us create a snowball? And what I mean by that is where it starts to move in the right direction and then accelerates. It's getting it going is usually the hardest part, is identifying what will start this thing in the right direction. And importantly, I think with salespeople, it's that you set the scene appropriately. If I came in, particularly new ones, right, well, I inherit a team and said, great, we're going to increase this metric by 60%. We're going to double the revenue. They won't believe you. They'll worry that you don't understand what's going on and what pressures are going to be on them. How the hell can we double our average deal value or shorten our sales cycle by half in a short period? And they'll lose respect and confidence because if they don't believe it's achievable, you probably won't achieve it. And those key dials that I focus on are things such as, these are typical ones, the average deal value, the win rate / conversion rate. So how many do we engage in that we actually then book business from as opposed to burn time on. How quickly do we close business? That deal, velocity deal. So does it typically take 90 days from engagement with a prospect or suspect to the point we close? So that's sales cycle length. And what coverage do we have in the pipeline? Because if you can adjust each of them, imagine you've got more in the pipeline to work of the right type of opportunities. Your average deal value increase a little bit than what you were doing before. So every time you win a bit more than you would have done. You win more than you were winning before. So you've got a bigger pipe. You're winning more of the average deals that you've got in the pipe. You're winning more at each deal and you're winning them quicker. Guess what? Your target performance goes up because all of those things add together to revenues coming in quicker. You're winning more deals. The deals are a higher value and it's taking it's more effective work on them. You're not burning cycles, just engaging with stuff that you're not winning. And that's what I focus on. So there's no rocket science to that, right? But it's often, I think, in business, you lose sight of those things and you keep doing what you've always done before and don't step back and look at this and go, how could we move those dials? When coming in new, fresh, right? Everything's new.
Yes.
You question everything.
Yeah. And I used to be a salesperson myself. I started my career as a salesperson, so it brings back all the memories of great KPIs. And you know what? It hasn't changed. We still look at win rates, at deal velocity, and grow in the pipeline. So your secret is fundamental in our discussions. And also you mentioned the marginal sales again. So I would like to deep dive a little bit into it, because I think what you touched upon as well is this incremental changes, this critical incremental outcomes, being better every day and improving sales as an outcome. So could you elaborate a little bit more on how you make your team focus on making a difference in terms of the marginal sales?
Well, let me tell the metrics and then maybe we can move into the how about, because this is the what, right, I guess.
Okay.
So, on those metrics, and I'll give examples. I don't come in and I've said, 60, pick big numbers. What I look at is, what do I believe, based on what I've assimilated and learned, what level of increase do I think we can get over what period? And it varies in businesses, right? Because some have longer sales cycles than others. If typically your sales cycle is a month, you can typically move those dials quicker and say, look, month over month, we're going to try and move it up these percentages. If your typical sales cycle is 90 days, what I would typically aim to do is say, look, we're going to move each of those dials by this percentage, and we're going to aim to achieve that in the next 6 months. We've got 2 quarters to make an impact. And I might pick, for example, look, we're going to increase the average deal value. Let's look at 7 to 8% average deal value. Because I've looked at the reasons behind it, I come up with a number that's appropriate. Okay. And that depends on the pricing, the market dynamic, et cetera, et cetera. The win rate might be today, let's say you're winning 1 in 6 that you engage in. Right, team, we're going to aim in the next 6 months to get to the point where we're winning 1 in 4, which means we're more effective or we're putting the right opportunities in the pipe. It might be a combination of things that causes that effect, but that's what we're going to aim to get to. And over a period that, based on the deal velocity today, feels achievable and not pie in the sky. So the team should feel stretched that, well, that'd be great. And yeah, it doesn't feel a mountain to climb, but it does feel, how are we going to do that? That's fine.
Yeah.
And then it's having methods and strategies with them, which we can talk about some of that in a second, of how do we execute better throughout the process of engagement with the prospect to deliver those type of results. And I've lived that right before, where I've come in and what we've done is I've done things such as we've increased the deal value by 4 or 5% because they're large deal values over that period. We've reduced the average sales time. I remember one was, I think it was 81 days, and we got it down to something like 62 days over a 6.
That's impressive. That's great.
And that means you're pulling deals in quicker, right? We increased the win rate from 1 in 5 to 1 in, I seem to remember 2.7, 2.8. So it means in that period, you're winning more of the ones you spend time on and you're winning them quicker. Guess what? Your numbers go up because you get more deals in those 2 quarters because you're getting them quicker and the average deal value's gone up and you're winning more of them. What I've found historically is when we've set those boundaries, sales buy into it that it's worth a go at this because this feels like we could probably increase those percentages, but help us understand how. And what I've found is, let's say we want to increase the win rate by this percentage, or the deal velocity we want to reduce from 90 to 80 days in the 6 months. We've overachieved those metrics, okay? Because we put all the effort in. And once you start to overachieve them, you start going, right, okay, we've now got the win velocity down to 63 days an average deal. We're not suddenly going to bring it down the same proportion again, because you can't just keep going until the point you close a deal the next day. But okay, we've got 63 days. For the next 6 months, we've done a big gap. Do we think we could reduce that to 55 days? So the marginal gain sometimes then becomes smaller.
Yeah.
You get to a point where you can't really improve something anymore because you've got optimal. But let's see if we can achieve an improvement again in the next 3 or 6 months or months, depending on your sales cycles. So you're slowly nudging forward towards those optimals, which gets you a much better result. And that's typically when I've come into businesses, how I've improved revenues very, very quickly in 3, 6, 9, 12 months and had a major impact, not because there was any magic, but because we focused on the right things, we did it progressively, and we did it in a way that sales bought into that, understood that it was achievable, and kept doing it. A repeated process.
Repeatable, yeah, exactly. Rinse and repeat. Exactly. And that's what businesses need, to scale up fast. That's why they hire you, right? So you mentioned, Ian, about the sales methodologies, right? So what sales methodologies you believe is the most efficient? We talk a lot about value selling, for example, outcome-based results. So yes, what is your viewpoint on different methodology, or your favorite methodology, perhaps?
Yeah, so I've got, okay, so whether it be, and so what have we got? We've got BANT, Spin, MEDDIC, Target Account Selling, TAS, Challenger. I could keep going, right? There's loads of them.
Yeah.
And they all overlap to different degrees, and people have their flavors. One of the issues I have with them, so it's, yes, have a methodology, but it's how you implement it and how sales understands it. And because I've seen often, and I'll give an example, methodology has been used to be systematic, as in you've got your CRM lined around it, and it's a black and white decision, and sales just follows it methodically and become like a robot. Let me give you an example. BANT. And I only pick on BANT because it's a simple example. There's Scotsman as well, of course. So BANT, budget, authority, need, timescale. I have seen salespeople go on sales courses for BANT. That be put then in the CRM. So you get budget, authority, need, timescale. Nice box to collect. And then that is the defining factor of whether we engage in qualification. And you must have that at the outset from an SDR call. So it doesn't feel natural, right? Okay, what's your budget? Well, I may not have a budget today, or you have no budget. So is that not an opportunity? I've sold to customers so many times when they didn't have a budget, but I identified the pain and a way of solving the pain and what the cost to that pain was, top or bottom line. And because of that, they went and found a budget.
Yeah, you create this. Yeah, exactly.
So too often these methodologies, I think, if they're not used appropriately, particularly with junior salespeople, not through their fault, fall into a trap of, robotically out trying to find who's the budget, what is the budget, and who makes this decision. And the questions just become, the customer can see what you're doing, right? It's not a natural conversation. And they use that as a black and white qualification process. Well, because they haven't got a budget, that's not a good prospect for us. There's more color to it than that. It is not that black and white in terms of, so that's the danger I see of methodologies. What I prefer to focus on with salespeople is their behavior styles. And that's how I get a change, because often what I've taken them through is some real basic things. And we can talk through some examples where I've had salespeople say, no one's ever talked to me about it. No one's ever highlighted that to me before. And it isn't magic, but it's just fundamentals of good selling. If you adopt those processes, you become a better salesperson, and anyone can do it. And I've coached so many salespeople, and it's fun. If you do it right, it becomes fun because your engagement with the prospect and the client becomes more interesting for you as well. So there's 2 or 3, maybe 4. Let me give you some headlines and we can quickly touch on those.
Yeah.
So proper qualification.
Mm-hmm.
And I can talk about what I mean by that in a minute, as opposed to,
Yes, qualification is the key, I believe, in
yeah,
sales.
it's whether or not people say they've qualified and whether they have. Something I've spoken about often, conversation versus communication. And it's something we fall into today in the electronic world and junior salespeople fall into.
Mm-hmm.
Rapport versus relationship, and what I call changing the channel. There's linkage between them. So let's talk through them, and you can guide me on your time you have. So let's do a couple of minutes on each. So qualification, through interviewing a lot of salespeople, through looking to employ them, and also through interviewing them for awards. And so I get the pleasure of engaging with a lot of salespeople in different points of their career, different experiences. In my opinion, a lot of salespeople are average in qualification, but think they're better than they are. And I'm still learning. I profess today, I am still learning the verbiage, how to qualify and be better at it, and be better at every time I speak to someone. And because what people will do, particularly where they've got a methodology, is go linear. They'll go, okay, do you have a budget? Great. And who would make this decision? And they think that you've already missed it. Because my opinion is, if my salesperson or myself if we know 20, 30 things more about that prospect's project and their agenda and what they're doing than the next salesperson, we're in a better position. Not necessarily to win. It might be to choose not to play. But if you know 30 more things about something than someone else, can you make better decisions? Can you help better? Are you in a better position? Yes, you are.
You are. You can influence as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So one quick example, someone says they've got a budget, and I do this with my salespeople. Okay. They've said, what they got? They got a budget of they said about £13,000. Great. Why is it £13,000? They'll invariably go, I don't know. You've missed a question straight away. The £13,000, you tell me, we've got 13,000. That's interesting. Thank you for sharing. Why is it that number? Where's that come from? And you might say, well, Ian, it's what we paid for the solution that we're not happy with. Okay, fantastic. If the solution to fix these other issues, which we will talk about, costs more than £13,000, but it solves those problems for you, what would you do? Well, Ian, we'd probably go and look for other budget. And how easy is that for you to do that? Well, up to a certain level, okay, what's that level? Oh, well, if it's up to 20K, we'd probably be okay. So now I know I'm not aiming at 10K, I'm aiming at 20K, and there's room to move. As opposed to a salesperson comes back and says, well, the problem is our product's going to be 18,000, so we need to figure out how we discount it because they've only got a budget of 13.
Oh, you don't want the discussion to go into this.
You just didn't ask some more questions, right? So often I'll coach salesmen, ask them the questions and go back and have another conversation and say, look, you've had an internal discussion about their project and you missed some questions and you didn't do a good job and apologies, but I'd really value how I come. And they'll respect that you've talked about them, you've reviewed your conversation, realized you didn't, and you've come back and now there's nothing wrong with going and asking more questions, right? So that's one on qualification. Conversation versus communication. Here's the trap. So you get an email back from a prospect saying, we're not sure about this, or how do we do this? What invariably will happen is your person will answer the questions on an email reply. What I will often do, if it's just, can I just confirm what time our meeting is tomorrow? Just email back, right? It's factual, it's easy. If it's, I'm a bit confused, I'm trying to figure out how this fits with this or something, I will respond back. And what I was talking about at number 4 point, I think, changing the channel, I will respond back on the same channel with, Dave, really interesting point, and there often is some complexity around that. When are you available to jump on a call and we can talk through it? Would this time or this time work for you? I'm changing the channel and turning a communication into a conversation.
Fantastic.
Right? Conversations are two-way, like we're doing here, where you can see the reaction, ideally in person, if not video, if not voice, but not electronically. And I see too often now people fall into saying, when you do a deal review, what's the latest? Oh, well, I chatted with them yesterday. When you say chatted, Sue, what do you mean? We went back and forth, had 4 or 5 emails. That's not chatted.
No.
Chatted infers to me you had a conversation. Okay. And your conversations are more important. You understand more. You don't get misunderstandings. You get inflection, and you also build rapport, which leads me to the other point.
Mm-hmm.
Rapport versus relationship. Often salespeople will also say in deal review, oh, I've got a great relationship with them. That is your opinion. I always question, is that the opinion of the prospect /customer? Because that's what values. And how do you build rapport versus relationship? It takes time. And I talk about the piggy bank. So very quickly, here's a piggy bank. If we have an email communication, perhaps you put 10 pence in the piggy bank. Okay. If we have a phone call, perhaps you put 50 pence in. If we have a video call, maybe it's £1. If we have a meeting where we're sat together, we have a coffee, and perhaps we walk through your building, I might put £5 in. So think, how do you build rapport and get your savings up to the point where you've got relationship or enough rapport that you can take out of the piggy bank? And what I mean by that is, if I want to challenge you, Dinara, with and be able to ask difficult questions, the more rapport relationship I've got. If you've got a relationship with someone, it's a lot easier, right, to have a frank discussion because the relationship's the foundation and they know where it's coming from. If you've got very superficial rapport, you tread more carefully and people will put their back, not share as much with you. I can't take more out of that piggy bank in report, in asking you a difficult question that I've put in. So if I have 3 or 4 meetings with you in your office, I've got much more equity with you and relationship or heavy rapport than someone who's just had 3 or 4 emails conversations. It doesn't mean you win the deal, but it means you can ask harder questions back to the questioning. It means you're in a stronger position and it means you can find out more.
Yes, you kind of build intimacy with your customer and get to know them. I think it's really great. I never actually thought about the difference, like rapport and relationship. And now you've uncovered this, explained this in more detail. I think you can apply it in anywhere, in any everyday life.
The example I give to people when I have longer, so in 10 seconds is, if you got to someone on the street and go, "Excuse me, I hope you don't mind, have you got the time?" They'll give you the time, right? Because you were polite about it. You built that enough rapport for what you were asking for. If you go up to them and really nice, but ask, could you lend me £5? You're not going to get it because they're going to go, well, what you're asking for outweighs any rapport. If it was someone you knew, you bumped into and said, look, I've got caught short. I need £5 for something in cash. Dave, your mate's going to go, yeah, give me it back when you see me, £5. Because you've got enough rapport relationship for what you're asking for.
Yeah, it's like this emotional banking account, they say. Yeah, that's really great. Thank you so much, Ian. It kind of leads me to my final question. Actually, 2 more, because it's so interesting to speak to you. One of the questions is, what is your favorite book? So this is number 1. And secondly, what advice would you give to a junior salesperson who's just beginning their journey on sales? They're all eager and hungry. What advice would you give for them to be successful in sales?
Okay, so book-wise, I'll give you something that's relevant to what we're talking about, which is probably what you want. And the immediate one that comes to mind is Fanatical Prospecting by Blount. Jeb writes, I've engaged with Jeb over the years, writes really good stuff, but it's so fundamental, so readable, and it just wakes you up to the realities of what you need to do to be successful in sales. But it's not rocket science complex, right? And that's what I like about it. So that's that one. Someone new coming into sales, what would I say is, one is be enthusiastic, be positive, and what's the word? Be resilient. You're not going to win everything in sales, no matter how long you've been doing it. You can get better, but prospects and sales processes get more complex. So you've got to be resilient, that you don't take things personally. And I'd go back to what I was saying is focus on being the best at the basics. Qualification and questioning. If you become a master of that, you will do well. Because most salespeople, in my experience, and I interview them, right? And in interviews, I see how you should be the best in interviews that you could, because a salesperson's job is to meet people they haven't known, find out stuff, understand the problem, and figure out, are you a good fit for this solution? That's what an interview is. So you should be the best at doing job interviews. Most of them don't even ask good questions. They have the standard stuff down.
And miss out on opportunity, yeah.
So, and I've met lots of salespeople who've been doing it 20, 30 years. And as far as they're concerned, they're baked, they know it all, and they just do what they've always done. The world changes. The buyers have changed. We've all become more informed through social media, through the internet, and self-informed, et cetera, et cetera. So, as I said, I'm still learning the verbiage and using passionate words in it. People love our product because when it does this for them, it really makes an impact and helps them. Everything about it is a skill. and you can always improve and get better. And I'm still learning and listening. And I often learn off junior salespeople who, because they'll have new ways of saying things that I haven't thought of, right? Because I've come through a journey that's different to the journey they've been on.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ian, for this valuable insights and advice. We're all learning every day from each other, from one another. It has been an absolute pleasure
Thank you.
speaking to you. Thank you.